And the cause is, well, Daniel Kahneman says as a species, we're just overly confident. We write the business case, we underestimate the costs, we overestimate the benefits, we spin success scenarios whilst ignoring the possibility of mistakes. Yeah? That's Daniel Kahneman, Nobel Prize winning Daniel Kahneman. Just as a species, we are overly confident. I mentioned about if it's your own money, you can do what you like with it. My older daughter rang me one day, she said, Steve, and she just say, Steve, Dad. That's right. The slide this week said, you know, Stephen Jones, she goes, I've got a problem. I can't call you Stephen, it's Dad. Said, Dad, why do you want another motorbike? You've already got two. I said, how many pairs of shoes have you got, Carly? She said, good point, Dad. That's the point. We justify it. We find ways to justify what we want. Daniel Kahneman. Bent Flupia at Oxford University says, no, it's deliberate. The guys that write the business cases deliberately. I did a session for Deloitte's about just after the global financial crash, talking about benefits. And they said, Steve would love to do what you say, but they don't employ us to tell them the truth. They employ us to write the business case to justify the project. If we don't do it, they'll give the job to Capgemini, Pricewaterhouse, or Ernst & Young. And I went home, and then bang, that's it. We pay people to write business cases to justify what we want to do anyway. And I tour the world, and I say to people, any business case writers here? And there's, you're brave. Normally they're no, come on. You know, who thinks Kahneman's right? And they say, no. We know exactly what we're doing. Wow. And of course, these guys, Kahneman has died now, but they collaborate. And so they talk about these two factors working together. But the ultimate, what Flupia talks about is this cost-benefit analysis fallacy. I'm an accountant by training. Cost-benefit analysis is my weapon of choice. It's what I was trained to use. The root cause of many of the problems we face is the overuse of cost-benefit and misuse of cost-benefit analysis. You know, we assume the forecasts are accurate. They're not. Again and again. So number one, we should ask the business case writer and the sponsor, what's your track record? In other words, I wanted a business, Jill, yeah? That's what I think I said on the course. On page 2 of the business case, what happened on the last 3 business cases? Merv, what happened to the last 3 projects you worked on? Costs against forecast, benefits against forecast, delivery on time against forecast, the last 3 times. Because if you were not feeling too well and went to see the doctor, and the doctor said, Merv, you're not looking too well, old chap. And he said, no, I'm feeling a bit, he goes, well, I'll give you a test. He gives you a test, you go back a week later, he goes, oh, shit, I think you got X, illness X. We can either give you the drugs, but I recommend surgery. Merv, you might be tempted to ask that doctor, well, how does surgery compare with non-surgery? And how do you as a surgeon compare with other surgeons, yeah? And if he says, I don't know, we don't track our performance, you'd say, you're supposed to be a professional, yeah? If they say we don't know, and we don't know, then we're guessing. This is someone else's money. So what's their track record? Because then they've got an incentive to actually deliver this time.
Stupid counter question.
Yeah, oh sorry, yes, sorry.
If they just lie and deliberately misrepresent their track record, because considering how poorly people track project metrics or how they outright fabricate reports, can you actually rely on an honest answer to that question? Usually the more honest project manager that performs better might actually show things slightly worse because
they will
actually say, well, we've spotted problems here, whereas the one who's been screwing up basically is thinking how to fluff up the metrics so that they look good.
Yeah.
So going back to that simple
it's a cultural issue.
How do you know they're telling the truth?
Absolutely, it's a cultural issue. And so you have to say to people, we expect you to tell the truth. If you don't, I say I'm an accountant, right? So how can we trust finance directors not to mistake the numbers? Because ultimately, it's a criminal offence. You know, you mistake your financial numbers in the accounts that go in front of the stock market, affect the stock price, that is a criminal offence. I used to work in the prison service, and at the prison conference one year, we went to Blackpool. Genius decision. In November, Blackpool in November. But I remember in this room, so it was all the prison governors from around the country, plus heads of groups from headquarters. And I was there, and this guy stood up, and Derek Lewis had just come in from the private sector to be the first private sector Director General of the prison service. And he was devolving responsibility and accountability to prison governors, giving them resources, having clear objectives and clear plans to deliver against. And one of the governors stood up and said, well, this is great, Mr. Lewis, but what's to stop me misstating the numbers? What's to stop me manipulating the numbers, stating things that aren't true? And Derek Lewis said, let me be abundantly clear. If you do that, I'll see you at the disciplinary hearing. You'll be sacked. This is a disciplinary offence. If you deliberately mistake numbers in an organisation, it's got to be a disciplinary offence. It's outrageous. You cannot allow people to do that. When I first took over as the head of chief accountant in the prison service, I said, can I see the budget? And they laid it out on the desk, and there was 3 columns, or more than 3, but I focused in on 3 columns. I said, what's that column? They said, that's the budget. I said, great. 4 columns, sorry. Second column, that's the actuals. Third column, variance. Fourth column, what's that? That's the actuals. I said, start again. So it's budget, actuals, variance, actuals. I said, you've got 2 actuals. That's the actuals we tell the Home Office and Treasury. They're running 2 sets of books. I said, that stops now. That is outrageous. Yeah?
But see, you detected that there are people who escape detection, so how do you actually...
Well, culture of the organisation has to stay, I mean, it comes as simple as when I worked in criminal justice and people are arguing around the table and we are pointing out, because people are caught by the lies they tell. If you manipulate the numbers, sooner or later you're going to be caught. And my boss said, guys, is this the best we can do? You're all arguing. No one trusts the numbers. I'm seeing ministers this afternoon. Do you want me to tell them this is the best that you can do? No, John, we're really sorry. So it's cultural. There has to be, I'm not trying to blame people or sack people, but there has to be an understanding we expect people to tell the truth. Yeah? Anything else is just not acceptable. Can't be, can it?
No, and I'm not...
Organisations run on numbers.
Yeah,
well, sort of.
Not the acceptability, just detectability, but anyway.
Well, we have to start by the understanding this is what we expect. And if it has been going on, it stops now. So problems, causes. So what do we need to do? Well, ultimately it's a combination of practices, governance, and culture. We've got to bring those through. So I've been talking about that, but primarily about these 7 principles that underpin the benefits management model that was in my original book, 2012, and then 2014, and then 2024. And I smile now because I had a conversation this morning where the guys that own the rights to the book, I wrote the book, they paid me to write the book, they've just realised they don't think they've received any royalties. That's for 15 years. Holy Mary. That's going to be interesting. So number 1, align benefits with strategy. Remember, so benefits link to objectives. I was on a call once and they said, look, what we have are objectives, and then we have KPIs to measure them, and then over here we have projects and programs, and they deliver outcomes and benefits, and the benefits kind of link to the KPIs. I said, no. 3-legged stool. Start with your objectives. What benefits, what measurable improvements would demonstrate we've achieved our objectives, and then everything else, projects, programs, outputs, outcomes, whatever model you want to have, is about delivering those measurable improvements. It's what the UK government IPA called 2-way traceability, from the project to the strategic objective, and from the strategic objective back to the project. That's that point. It's a model here as the PMI was saying to Merv, there's no standard categorization, and yet when you look at government frameworks, they have standard categorizations. There is no standard because it has to be driven by what your objectives are. Yeah? So every organization for every portfolio needs to design their own framework. But this, I said to Merv, I would have paid, the PMI paid me to do some research. I would have paid them, I would have given them the money back for that quote. Project benefits synonymous with positive strategic impacts. Yeah? It's that simple. Objectives, benefits, projects and programs. Did I include? Just in case it's not there, there's a quote, I don't know if I've taken it or not, included it or not. The New Zealand government said, benefits that aren't aligned with objectives, strategic objectives, are not worth having. They're a waste of scarce resources, I think was the quote. Because the benefit doesn't happen by some miracle. So you get these business cases that list 20 benefits. Yeah? Why? All I understand is what contribution will you make? That's why someone put this up. That's not quite what I said, but anyway, strategic alignment means nothing. Strategic contribution is what matters, Steve Jenner. Well, I kind of said that, but I used to get business cases that said we had 5 objectives, and it would say aligned, aligned, highly aligned, highly aligned, aligned, 200 million, please. Yeah? Because what do you think they're going to say? Not aligned? Not aligned? You can align anything with anything. So we need to understand the strategic contribution. So benefits are the way that we can assess strategic contribution. Yeah? I did a session with the PMI back in, I think it's 2015, 16, 17, somewhere around that period. And Antonio Nieto Rodriguez, the past chair of PMI Global, a very impressive individual. And Antonio stood up and he spoke about why is it that senior managers aren't interested in projects and programs in our organizations? Why don't they take an interest? And he's written a whole book about it. But everyone in the audience will say, oh yeah, they just don't get it. Our senior managers aren't interested. And I said, can you tell me what difference what contribution your project will make to strategic objectives? And they said no. I said, well, then why would they be interested? If I'm a senior manager and you bring me a project and it doesn't tell me what contribution it's going to make to our strategic objectives, why would I be interested? Yeah? If you were a senior manager, what you're paid to deliver are your organization's strategic objectives. Yeah? So, objectives and the analogy. You say, well, Steve, maybe. I say, we know you've quoted Antonio, past chair of PMI Global. We know you've quoted IPA with their two-way traceability. I would then refer you to, what about OKRs? Anyone use OKRs? Anyone heard about them? You should get the book, read about the first 50 pages, that's all you need. OKRs written by John Doerr, ex-Intel, applied OKRs at Google, also used at Netflix and Disney and Samsung. Yeah, so some pretty large private sector organizations worldwide. Objectives, key results, initiatives. Prioritize. You have to prioritize. Prioritize your objectives, no more than 3 to 5, no more than 3 to 5 key results for each objective. And then you commission your initiatives, your projects and programs to deliver the key results that show you've achieved your objectives. That's John Doerr. The subtitle of his book is The Simple Idea That Delivers 10 Times Growth. And that was from the chief exec of Google. So, you want to argue? Go and argue Google. So, it's simple. But of course, as I was saying to Merv, it's simple in theory. Applying it is where it becomes difficult. But we overcomplicate the theory. We think the benefits person we need, we'll get Steve in and I'll come in with my magic benefit stick, or Merv, yeah? And we'll pretend to be benefit specialists. It was like with HS2. when they advertise these jobs, everyone's, oh wow, imagine getting the benefits job with HS2. I mean, you're going to be set up for the next 10 years until they eventually work out we shouldn't be doing it. And one of the people who's involved in that actually wrote to me online and said, but I'm the only person